Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for our first webinar as part of our Adaptive Fashion series in partnership with Runway of Dreams and Gamut Management. If you didn't know that this was a series, please don't worry. You will each receive a link to register for the next 3 webinars, where we will continue to dive deeper into the subject with new leading experts joining us each week. Today, we are joined by Mindy Shire, who is the founder of Runway of Dreams and Gamut Management. Runway of Dreams Foundation is a nonprofit organization that works towards a future of inclusion, acceptance, and opportunity in the fashion industry for people with disabilities. The foundation develops, delivers, and supports programs and events that celebrate people's differences, breaks down stereotypes, highlights the need for mainstream adaptive apparel, and showcases people with disabilities in fashion. With the overwhelming amount of requests Mindy received at Runway of Dreams from a multitude of brands and industries for connections to people with disabilities, in 2019, Mindy created Gamut Talent Management to represent people with disabilities and create a marketplace where businesses and industries can connect to this target audience. Gamut is rebranding the way people with disabilities are viewed, marketed to, and represented in the mainstream world. Mindy has been such an incredible friend to the CFDA. We began working with her back in 2019, where she joined us as a speaker at our Fashion Leadership Conference, and she also hosted an intimate roundtable discussion for our members to meet, listen, and learn from people with disabilities. So I really want to acknowledge and thank Mindy and her entire team for all their generosity in building this program with us and helping us advance this conversation for our industry. I also want to extend my sincere thanks to our guests, Brandon Farbstein, Julian Covino, Estella Lugo, Marty O'Connor, and Grace Strobel, who are joining us today in kicking off this important conversation. Our 5 guests will be sharing their insights, experiences, and perspectives on fashion. So before I hand it over to Mindy, I want to encourage you all to participate in this conversation. We are holding a significant amount of time at the end for an open discussion. And please know that this is a safe space to ask questions. Our 6 guests are very eager and open to answering any of your questions, and you can submit those via the chat box feature. So with that all being said, it is my pleasure to now hand this over to Mindy Shire.
Thank you so much, Sasha, and thank you a tremendous amount to the Council of Fashion Designers of America. It has been a true privilege and an honor to be able to work side by side with, in my opinion, the greatest governing group in the fashion industry, and one that is certainly pioneering in taking tremendous interest in the importance of including people with disabilities, the importance of creating a new category in the fashion industry of adaptive, and really understanding that people with disabilities are consumers too. They represent the largest minority on our planet, with an estimated 1 billion people who make up this population, and certainly something that, this is a true fact, every single one of us is going to be a part of at some point in our life, whether that is just getting old or something that happens during your life or you're born with it. I am a fashion designer by trade and also the mom of a child with muscular dystrophy. So this is not only personal to me, it has been an unbelievable journey professionally to be able to work with incredible brands, certainly the CFDA, the pioneers that you will hear from in our next session next Thursday, the leaders in this movement from Tommy Hilfiger, Stride Right, Target, Kohl's, LVMH, and Zappos. They will all be represented on next week's panel, as well as the following week, which focuses on the research and the academics that have really been studying the business case behind adaptive and the power and the spending amount, which is estimated at $3 trillion that's being left on the table every year for not including people with disabilities. And finally, rounding out the series with innovators within the world of people with disabilities that are really making incredible strides and coming up with solves that turn into very successful businesses in marrying both technology and fashion and just pure innovation. So I do hope that you join us for all of our panel series, and this one and our kickoff is particularly important to me because every single one of the panelists has now become a friend, a part of our family, and a critically important voice in the world of disabilities. As you will soon get to know them, each one of them has a different story, a different disability, a different time in their life that it happened, but each has the unifying voice of the importance of inclusion, the why, the reason that we're here, and to help guide everyone listening to this panel on the how, which is why we saved so much time at the end, because we want to be your partners. We want to have a forum, a time to be able to answer questions that you haven't been able to ask, or that you were fearful, or you're nervous that anything is going to be offensive. All untrue. So as Sasha mentioned, this is the time to do it. This is your safe place. We are here to guide, support, and most importantly, partner. So without further ado, I'd love to spend a little time with each of the panelists for them to tell you their story. So Marty, I'm going to start with you, please.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Mindy. Thank you to everyone who's viewing. My name is Marty O'Connor. I'm a product of Orange County, California. Being a Southern California boy, I always had a board under my feet and got myself into a lot of stupid situations. But, you know, for me, like my love of action sports and just kind of living that lifestyle, it really honed in towards the end of high school, and I ended up going to college. And I was a collegiate snowboarder and also ended up doing volleyball. So I was always a very active person. And after college, I continued that lifestyle. I got into my professional life. And unfortunately, one hot summer day, dehydration got the best of me. And I had sat down on the staircase to eat a slice of pizza. And when I stood up, I completely blacked out, fell forward, and broke my neck. I'm a C3, C4 spinal cord injury, paralyzed from the shoulders down. You know, I tried to take that lifestyle that I had before and just channel every bit of energy and grit that I had to push through. But I realized that that was not the answer, and that I was called to really harness the power of my mind moving forward. And from that point, I've been on just a relentless pursuit of turning my adversity into my advantage. And so with that, I mean, I dove deep again into entrepreneurship. I went back and got my MBA, and I started a podcast just to try and empower those who have disabilities and just really spread the good word, and doing a little bit of volunteering, a little bit of speaking. And just, again, so happy to be here with all of you to dive into just how exciting and how critical fashion is to us, and really looking forward to those conversations.
Thank you, Marty. Really appreciate it. Next, we have Brandon Farbstein.
Thank you so much, Mindy, and to the council for having all of us. It's an honor. My name is Brandon Farbstein. I'm an empowerment speaker, author, and Gen Z activist, and I am also 21 years old. I was born with a very rare form of dwarfism and am one of 84 people in medical history to be diagnosed with this specific condition. And I've taken what I used to hate most about myself, which was being in this body and being so different from all those around me, to now turning it into a platform that has empowered and inspired millions of people all around the world, both through my speaking and social media. I was given the opportunity when I was 15 to give a TED Talk, and it was through that talk which not only was the very first time that I shared my story and I was vulnerable and real with what I was going through, it was in that moment that I found my purpose and my mission to elevate empathy. And I've been following that ever since. And the greatest honor now is to be the person who I needed when I was at my lowest point of not wanting to be here anymore, and to be considered a role model that others can look up to, not just that have disabilities and differences, but truly everybody, because we all can relate to feeling invisible or to feeling unworthy. And I'm here to, like I said, elevate empathy. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brandon. Grace, your turn, and her beautiful mother, Linda.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Hey, everyone. I'm Grace Strobel. Then I'm 24 years old. But I was born with Down syndrome. But Down syndrome does not define me. But I'm a model. I'm a speaker. I'm an athlete. I'm an advocate. And then about 2 years ago, I was working in a lunchroom. Some kids started making fun of me. When they laughed at me that day, I felt alone and hated. But I cried so hard. But I cannot stop. That is when I decided I wanted to make a difference. And I wanted to share with students what it's like to have struggles. Then you can show how you can change someone's life just by being kind and giving respect.
Do you want to tell them also how you got into modeling?
Sure.
Grace will tell you also how she got into modeling.
When I was researching to make the Grace effect, I saw another girl with Down syndrome that was a model. So I asked my mom if I could be a model. She said, "I'll see why not. So let's do this, Grace." So we started on this amazing journey that brought me here today.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much for having us. We're happy to be here.
Yep. I'm so happy.
And we're equally as happy. And I do have to say that I first found Grace when I was watching the Today Show, and her beautiful face and story was being shared. And I immediately said, I have to get in touch with this one. So thank you for both Linda and Grace for being a part of this. Julian.
Hi, firstly, thank you for having me, everybody, and Mindy. My name is Julian Covino. I'm 25 years old. My pronouns are he, him. I am a disabled and transgender model and social activist. My activism takes on a lot of different forms, but overall, my goal is to, have that representation for my respective communities, make brands more socially conscious, diverse, and aware. I have a rare genetic condition. It's progressive or degenerative. So I wasn't always disabled, but I've always been chronically ill. While I was in college, I was actually in college for neuropsychology, which is very different than what I'm doing now. But I ended up being bedbound for around 2 years because of my illness. And I felt really alone and like there was nobody else like me. So I started my platform. And it turns out that I was wrong, because by the time that I had graduated school, I had this entire new path in front of me. And I realized that that's where I needed to be and that there was a need for it. There was so many people like me. And overall, I just want people to see me and think that they could do the same thing one day.
Perfect. And last but certainly not least, Estella.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again. I'm so honored to be part of this very important conversation today. My name is Estella Lugo, and I was diagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disorder at the age of 4, also known as CMT. It is not a tooth disorder, but it does affect my hands, causing atrophy, and it affects my feet, causing partial paralysis. So I grew up my entire life with a disability. And I also grew up my entire childhood and life wearing these. If you could see, I'm holding up like braces. So as you can imagine, that was a fashion challenge and continues to be in and of itself. But more importantly, I grew up feeling and carrying a lot of shame around having disability. And also, I believe a lot of it was due to the fact that I didn't see anyone out there that looked like me in mainstream media or in the fashion world. So my work today really focuses on changing that. And I'm fortunate enough to work with some incredible people towards that mission. First and foremost, with the Hereditary Neuropathy Foundation that funds vital research and programs for CMT families. I also have collaborated with the fabulous Lainey Ishbia of Trendable, and we travel the world pre-COVID, now virtually, providing workshops to help people communicate more effectively about disability so that they can become better advocates for themselves and for others. We also have a podcast called Embrace It with Lainey and Estella, where we interview top influencers in the disability community, such as Mindy, and we help empower women to feel and look their best while they're living with the disability. And most recently, I've been able to collaborate with some incredibly talented young design students at the Fashion Institute of Technology as an adjunct professor for their brand new Design for Social Impact program, which is a full circle moment for me as an alumni and as a design student myself. So this is really an incredible and exciting collaboration, and I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you. So now I'm going to move into asking more poignant questions to each of the panelists, and then have actually a second panelist do a little bit of a weigh-in from their opinion. So Julian, I'm going to start with you. I recently read a really profound quote that basically says, and definitely echoes what Estella just said, that if you don't see it, you can't dream it. And I think that is so critical, especially in the conversations that we're about to have, that really, as you mentioned, you haven't seen, growing up, you didn't see any other Julians or anything that would allow you to look and say, well, that could be me. That didn't happen. And these are things that we're trying to change. But when we do talk about true inclusion in fashion, what does inclusion mean to you?
Yeah, so there seems to be a disconnect of what people right now think inclusion is versus like what it really is. So to me, it means including people, specifically in this case, people with disabilities, without exploiting them, without doing it through means of tokenism. It means consulting with us, whether that's through campaigns or designs. It means including us with all the other models and not segregating us into different categories or different shows like I've experienced a lot of. It means making clothing accessible. It also means, realizing that we're not, it's echoing what you said about there being more than 1 billion of us, like realizing that we're not like rare, like there's a lot of us, and representation truly does matter, like you said. It inspires people to accept themselves, to take action, to break down traditional beauty standards. Like if people do see, like you said, more Julians and they're out there, then they're going to do it as well. Versus if they were never exposed to that, it might be really hard to get there. But yeah, and overall, the fashion industry should represent the people, the consumer, not an idea of beauty being sold to the consumer. Because there's a misconception of like there's no need for this, but there is a very big need for this, and I found that out through building my platform. So.
And do you, what would be your ultimate vision of what the industry would look like, let's say in 20 years? What would be the ultimate?
Kind of going back to what I said, to me it would mean fashion representing the people, because for the longest time it hasn't. It's represented an idea. So I want to see I don't want to use the word like normal, but like average people. Like I want to see what people actually look like. Because when I'm shopping online, especially right now during COVID times, it's hard to shop when I don't see people either as queer looking as me, or I don't see them sitting down in a wheelchair. So I don't know how the pants are going to fit. I don't know how the outfit's going to work out, or it's kind of how it's going to work with my feeding tube. So that's my vision. I just want to see it normalized, not exploited, just normalized across the board.
Agree. And I think you hit on some really important topics there, especially because you represent many different communities. And I think that there's room for everyone. Estella, especially because you are an alumni of FIT and, you know, are clearly embedded in the fashion industry. What is your opinion? What are your thoughts on what the industry, the direction that it should be going in?
Yeah, so I think, you know, the best breakdown that I've heard to date so far of inclusion is starting with accessibility. Accessibility is getting into the building, right? Diversity is getting invited to the table. Inclusion is having a voice at that table. And if we take it one step further, belonging is having your voice heard at that table. So for me, inclusion is not, you know, does not just stop at like the billboard or the marketing campaign and the ads. It's literally interwoven throughout the entire brand. And it's more importantly what's happening behind that curtain and what's happening in the culture. You know, it's like hiring Mark, who has CP and is going to be the head of accounting. You know, it's in promoting an employee with a limb difference to becoming store manager, or hiring, you know, an inclusive dance company for your next conference or event. So it's really, you know, about shining that spotlight on, you know, behind the curtain, on the employees, on the team members, and not just sharing a photo like, you know, you mentioned about tokenism, but diving deeper and sharing their story so that those conversations can be opened up throughout the brands and throughout the entire platform.
Would you mind saying the breakdown again? Because I think if there's one takeaway from this first panel, I think you nailed it. And I really, really want people to digest this. Would you mind repeating that, please?
Absolutely. So accessibility is getting into the building. Diversity is getting invited to the table. Inclusion is having a voice at that table. And belonging is having your voice heard at the table.
Beautiful. Thank you. Critically important. Marty, I want to spend a little time with you on the fact that before the accident, Marty had a total style, right? As you said, California boy, you know, living on the edge, you have the super cool hair, all of the above. After the accident, talk to us about the importance of the fact that, yes, your body is different. Yes, you are now in a wheelchair, but is your style different? Did your style need to change when your body did?
Absolutely. That was such a tough transition for me. You know, I feel that my background in action sports, it wasn't just what you did, what trick you did, but how you did it and how you expressed yourself. I feel like it truly is an extension of our personality. And so after I got hurt, you know, being able to present myself in, you know, ways that I felt were representative of who I am and how I wanted to, you know, showcase myself to the world. Now all of a sudden I'm stuck in, you know, sweatpants and like, you know, dry fit shirts and, you know, basically gym attire or loungewear, just because that's what I'm supposed to do. It's kind of drilled into your mind at the hospital that, you know, you got to be very careful about pressure sores, this, that, and the other. When really, I think that, you know, the clothing itself can work for us. You know, you need to be careful, but it's something that I felt more paralyzed by the optics of me having to present myself a certain way now. and that the clothes that I had before don't typically work for me now, especially given, you know, some of the medical devices you have to use, or some of, you know, sitting in a chair. I mean, your gut's going to hang out a little bit more. And so trying to make that fashion work for you is something that is critical. And I mean, Estella, Julian, you guys hit it right on the head. It's not the optics of diversity. It is the inclusion, the sharing of ideas, and getting involved in the decisions, and the how of making it work. And because when we just see someone with a disability, you know, in an ad or on a billboard or something, it's like that kind of is what defines us. Like, oh, that, you know, model's in a chair or whatever. I feel like the story behind it and who we are can, you know, be showcased through clothing that works, and the stories of who we are, that we're just normal people, just like everybody else. We have a voice, and that the things that we've struggled with actually empower us in ways that, you know, so many other people just haven't experienced. You know, I think there's such a diversity of thought that can be brought to the table from people who have gone through, you know, different situations such as that. And I think that diversity of thought just brings a well-rounded perspective, and a new strategy that I think that could be, you know, really helpful to the industry. And so just at the end of the day, I mean, I want to look my best, feel my best, and it has been tough to find clothing that works for me. You know, you always got to tailor, but if, you know, if the industry itself wants to get on board, there needs to be that seat at the table, and we need to belong and have those conversations. And, you know, I know there's difficulty in that, you know, but that's why we want to be here to, you know, hear out what you guys are experiencing in the industry. What are those barriers to entry? How can we make it still profitable for your companies? So I'm open to all those conversations here today. And again, yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I think this is a great thing we're doing.
Amazing. So one thing I want to kind of underscore a bit about what you just spoke of, and kind of put it in context, certainly for who we're speaking to today, is that if you were a Tom Ford customer prior to your accident, you still want to be a Tom Ford, you know, wear Tom Ford after the accident. And that's something that I definitely want our audience to understand, that you could be missing out on consumers out there, that something happens in their life, or, you know, there's a change, but they still want to support your brand. They still want to look amazing and feel the way that they did prior to something happening in their life. So I think that you really said it so beautifully. And Julian, I know, especially through the iterations of your disability and how it affected you at different stages of your life, I'm sure your style probably was critically important, but it must have been a challenge based on your physical ability to maintain that style. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I want to echo what you said about being like a Tom Ford customer. I've always been into high fashion, and I did modeling when I was younger, but I stopped doing it because I didn't feel included, both in a disability way, but also in a trans way as well. So that also had to change for me, just like with Marty, because I've gone through different medical devices. I had braces, I still do, like Estella. I've had many different feeding tubes, different wheelchairs, different walkers, crutches. All of that affects your outfits. Just like Marty was saying, kind of when you're sitting in a wheelchair, it's almost like, I describe it to people like you're really full, like after eating something, unbutton your pants or something. It's pants just don't fit. They cut you in the stomach like that. So you either have to wear something with elastic, and maybe that's not the look you're going for. You know, maybe that's not what you want. You know, jackets drag on the wheels. Shirts with feeding tubes, they just don't work out. You're limited in your choices, and a lot of those choices are either too expensive because they're considered like a specialty, or they look too medical, which, like you were saying, if you're a model or you were into fashion, we don't want that, because not every, they look almost like they're marketed towards older people with disabilities, which isn't necessarily bad, but they forget that there's a whole, I feel like it's either kids or older people, but they forget there's a whole section of people that are missing from that, like the teens, the 20s and on. So it's just difficult. I've only seen a few cases where that's not really true. Like I know Target and Tommy Hilfiger have come out with some really good examples of that, and I want to see more of that, you know.
And, you know, one important, you know, also underscoring what you both just spoke about is I've read quite a bit on Frida Kahlo, and she had polio, had to wear an extensive brace around her, really, you know, struggled with her ambulatory. And so that is why she chose to wear such bright colors, to wear her hair the way she did, to have her eyebrows the way that, because she, and I believe this is a quote, wanted people to see her before her disability. And I think that it really is such an important part of our discussion today, that fashion actually has a very, very important part of who we are as humans. And, you know, many times people say, oh, it's the fashion industry, but the fact is that it can change lives while we're here, while we're living it. It can add to self-esteem and confidence. And that is critically important to who we are as humans. Grace, I know that you spoke about how important it is for you and how you feel when you get to model or you have modeled. We've had the privilege of having you in our fashion shows, and you just actually were a part of kicking off New York Fashion Week with us in September. What do you think, what does it feel like to you to be on the runway?
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. As a dream come true, it gives me a voice. It's about making people feel valued, represented, and included.
Yeah, and it's kind of echoes exactly what everybody else said. Prior to this,
Yep.
I think, you know, this is kind of like unheard voices. And when you start to, I think through exposure, we can create change. And so when you have repeated exposure, you start to change the perception of who you thought that person was. Because I think we all fear what we don't understand, and we all fear what we don't know. And that's why it was really important when Grace was made fun of that we addressed that. When that was happening, it was due to her not being able to open up some containers very quickly. She could do it, but at the moment when the kids were laughing, I thought, wow, they really don't understand. And I really think that through our voices and through media and through campaigns, if we can keep creating exposure, we can keep changing the perceptions of who we think people with disabilities are. Because I think the most human need is wanting to belong, wanting to be recognized, and feel like that you are part of everybody else. And I think that's what fashion does, and fashion campaign does. And then you take it further by including this population in the decision-making process. But I think where we go from being able to see somebody, like I always think of Grace as like a spirit keeper. She shows people a path. She shows that it can be done. And maybe somebody else will look at her and say, she can do it, I can do it. And I feel okay with myself. So
beautiful. Thank you, Linda. And speaking of campaigns, Grace is also the face and the ambassador for Obagi. And I think that is something that certainly we can expand the conversation to also include beauty and the industry that also, can include people with disabilities, and it's critically important to include people with disabilities. So you'll see much more of Grace to represent Obagi, and we're really excited about that. Marty, you were also in our New York Fashion Week show. What did it feel like for you?
Wow. Well, definitely got me out of my comfort zone for one, but it's such a great thing. It's an empowering feeling to be able to just represent some of the companies that are taking those steps to give us, that accessibility in our clothing. Like it's always been like fashion over function. Full disclosure, I have 2 out of 4 buttons down on my pants right now because it just doesn't work. Like I like to wear skinny jeans. I like to wear, my jackets a certain way. And so to be able to be part of an event like that, really, I think opened the eyes of a lot of people in the industry, a lot of people in the fashion world that maybe they just don't see us. And I think this inclusion will open more people's eyes to the value that we bring. I think our uniqueness is not a mistake. And I think with that, we bring tremendous value to the table. And I just really think that, the more that we are in the picture and in the decision making and in the conversations, and represented across the board, I think that the industry itself and others will find the value that we bring to it, and that well-roundedness. I think that this could be a strategic play, a profitability play. It's not just, it's not just virtue signaling. I think there's like some serious value in what we bring to the table. It's a huge untapped market, and just being here is amazing to take these steps forward, in order to give ourselves a bigger voice here.
Agreed. Estella, I read something that I thought was so brilliant on your Instagram, and it said, instead of teaching don't stare, let's start teaching say hello. And I think that it's so powerful. What would be your kind of elevator pitch to kind of alleviate fear and to say hello, so that we can, have more conversations like this?
Yeah, so I think it starts, with, like Grace mentioned, the youngest generations, and just reprogramming the way that we have been programmed for so long by society that, disability is them and not us. There's a great quote also by Marissa Hamamoto who says that, who are they? It's us. Inclusion is about us. So recognizing that the stigmas are there, and to kind of give ourselves a little slack and understanding that, we've been programmed for so long to think of disability in a negative way. So now we have the choice. Do we want to continue that stigma, or do we want to be part of the conversation? So I think just, stepping out of our comfort zone and just starting with a simple hello, just like we would anyone else. We're not, you don't have to talk to somebody in a different way just because they have a disability. Starting out with a genuine compliment. And this is where fashion is such a great icebreaker, right? Because you can compliment someone on their outfit or find synchronicity there. And, it's just talking to us like you would anyone else. And I, myself in the past have been approached by strangers, like literally just asking me, what's wrong with your legs? So I don't recommend that, because obviously you're putting somebody on the defense mechanism there, and you're just literally tunnel vision seeing their imperfections rather than the person. So yeah, just teaching young children at a young age that interacting with people with disabilities is normal, and just setting the stage for later on when they grow up to have more in-depth conversations is super, super powerful to eliminating that shame.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've had certainly personal experience with this with my son Oliver, and that, you know, the kids would ask you, why do you walk weird? Why do you fall all the time? Things like that. And it is helping him understand that it comes from curiosity. Yes, perhaps it could have been crafted a different way, but dispelling the curiosity by simply stating, my muscles don't work the way that yours do, ends the conversation. Great, let's move on. Let's go back to our life. But the ignoring or the fear of it, I think, is probably also one of the contributing reasons that it has taken so long for the industry to be inclusive, because of the fear, because of, you know, fear of not getting it wrong, of getting it right, of getting it wrong, of promoting it wrong, seeing it wrong. And really, that's one of the key parts of why we wanted to do this series, and certainly with the CFDA, is to do our part in dispelling that fear. And Brandon, I'm going to kind of switch it back to you for a second on kind of the question that I asked Estella, in terms of what would be your elevator pitch? What would you say to somebody to help dispel that fear?
I think the really important thing is to help humanize disability. The fact that we may be in a wheelchair, or for me, I use a Segway as my mobility device, and I'm a lot smaller than the average adult, of course. It's really just showing, just like Estella said, youth especially, that we are people, and it's okay to say hi. It's okay to ask questions and be inquisitive about what is not wrong with our bodies. I don't think that's the right way, but what the truth of who we are is. And I think it's totally okay to be uncomfortable in just the fact that we don't have all the answers. Even us in the disability space, I know I could probably speak for everybody on the panel. We're still learning every single day because this space is evolving on such a rapid level. So I go back to, it's okay to ask questions and to not assume, and to just remember that no matter the condition or accident or whatever the disability is, we have the ability to just say hi, to offer a smile, and to remember that people are people are people are people.
Beautiful. And actually, to extend upon that, Brandon, I know that you so fully believe in empowering ourselves to step up. And 10 feet tall.
Mindy, hold on one sec. I think there's some feedback from. Okay. Maybe Marty. I think if you don't mind. I know. Yeah. Cool. Sweet.
Perfect. So for everybody to feel 10 feet tall, which, as I can point out, is the incredible book that you wrote, and I highly, highly recommend it to everybody. It's an amazing read. But how do you feel that the fashion industry can step up with support, of course?
So I think it's twofold, and definitely echoing the amazing sentiments from the panelists before. Representation is so incredibly important, not only for those of us that have a disability to see that we're not the only one, and that we are beautiful too. Even guys can be beautiful, I think. I really believe it's also about bringing us to the table to co-create solutions, because representation only takes us, let's say, 50%. That other 50% is exactly what we're doing right now, and being able to address its disability. My big thing, it's not a monolith. And there's so much diversity truly among the disability community. And so being able to bring us together to have these dialogues and to say, I'm under 4 feet tall, Marty's in a wheelchair, Estella has braces on her legs, Julian's in a wheel. Like we all have different things, different experiences, and that's the value of being able to truly listen and co-create with us that have the lived experience and can come to the table with some really incredible perspectives, as hopefully all of you have picked up on in the last hour or so.
Yes, thank you. And certainly, you know, Grace and Linda, I think that you guys have echoed that in the work that you have done, not only with students to help them understand, but also by being out there. Grace is a spokesperson. She is going to be the face of a brand. So do you feel do you echo what Brandon just said about, you know, being a part of this?
We do. You know what? I think, how does modeling make you feel?
Oh yeah, it makes me feel good about myself.
Does it make you feel like you belong?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, people with disabilities sometimes feel invisible, and like they're not as worthy. And until we can start making people or showing people that it's not something to fear, that we'll start breaking barriers down to be able to make the approaches of, you know, instead of staring, just say hi, talk to me like you would anybody else, you know, don't talk to me like a child, just maybe talk to me like anybody else. I don't need to be talked to louder or exaggerated. People with disabilities have the same basic desires as everybody else, and they just want that human dignity and to feel like they are a part of something. And I think really that what we're doing here is creating that change. And we are so thankful we get to be a part of changing that landscape for people with disabilities, because when you look at diversity now, you automatically think diversity as different skin color and maybe body shape. But, you know, people with disabilities haven't caught up with that fold, you know, because we are part of the human race. We're part of the human diversity. So.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. And actually, on that note, which is so perfect, I'm going to spring a final question on my panelists to truly echo that you're just the same as everybody else. And we've all just gone through a very unifying experience of having to quarantine. Every single person has had to experience that. So I'd be curious from all of our panelists, what was the funniest or most outrageous thing that you did while you were forced to quarantine? I'll give you guys a second because I'll tell you mine, that I couldn't bear not being able to get dressed up every day and head to the city and wear my favorite outfits. And believe me, I couldn't wait to take the tags off this one today. I love it so much. So I decided, well, who's telling me I can't get dressed up every day? So I did. And I started this thing called #ShelterChic, and I had pictures of myself on our social media that I was wearing like a full sequin gown while doing the laundry. I was wearing this fabulous pantsuit when I was unloading the dishes and taking the dog for a walk. And guess what? It made me feel so much better. But it was silly and outrageous, and it's what I did. So, Brandon.
Silly or outrageous? It's pretty crazy how many batches of cookies I made in the last like 9-month period. That's been one of my outlets, just the amount of baking and cooking. But it's worth it. It's definitely worth the extra calories and all that.
Definitely. The aroma alone can lift your spirits.
Exactly.
Perfect. Julian.
I don't know if this was necessarily a good idea, but I moved. I moved from a really small town in Florida to Philadelphia. So I went from one quarantine household to another. And since I can't really go many places, I also get dressed up like you, like I'm dressed up right now. And I do this every day. I'll have my own fashion shows. Me and my partner will get dressed up and go on dates like in our apartment. So or just drive around.
That's a good add-on. I love
Yeah,
that. I would like secretly ask the family if anybody wants coffee or anything, and I'll just go to Dunkin' Donuts so somebody can see what I'm wearing outside of my family who doesn't even think it's funny anymore. So good, I get it. Thank you. Estella.
Yeah, so two things come to mind. The first, since I was quarantined away from my family, who I'm very close with, putting on some virtual puppet shows for my nephews in New York from Florida. So that was a lot of fun. And second, it actually gave me an opportunity to do something I'd wanted to do for many, many years, which was interview my parents on Zoom and just record their life story and how they met, and just document that for, for generations to come. And it's just really just a great, feel good opportunity.
I love it. Marty. Oh, shoot, Marty's still. Oh, there we go. Okay.
There we go. Awesome. Yeah, so I really miss the outdoors. I think it's so therapeutic for me to be able to get outside and go to concerts, go out with my friends, go and do all those sorts of things. So I was just getting stir crazy, and I decided to go camping in my backyard. So I went and got like a big 10-person tent, and got like an inflatable queen mattress to just throw in there. Had like a bonfire in the backyard, did s'mores and all of that, and it was awesome. Honestly, it was a good test run because I haven't been camping out in the actual wilderness since I got in a wheelchair. So I think it was definitely destiny to make it happen and go through all those dry runs. And it was just, it kind of brought us all together. You got to have those campfire conversations, and it didn't matter if the campfire was in my backyard. It could have been in the middle of Alaska for all we cared. It was an awesome time. And yeah, I played way too much Call of Duty, so it was nice to go get outside and do some of that.
Love it. Thank you. And last, Grace.
What did you like to do when we were quarantined?
Oh yeah, I love doing TikToks with my family.
What was your favorite one?
Like Mamma Mia.
No, Mamma Mia. Yeah, they did. She and her sister did a hilarious TikTok out by the pool.
Oh yeah.
And we just did fun things. We did Uncle Buck, and we had so much fun, and my husband and I were doing it too. So it's just a cheap form of entertainment, but it's hilarious, so we had fun.
I agree. I loved it so much, and I beg my family to let me do it with them, but apparently I'm not that good. They tell me that I cannot, but I love it. I'm with you, and I want to follow you, Grace, to watch.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. It is always an honor and a privilege to be able to have you all a part of this journey with me. I think your voices are magnificent. I think that your journeys, your path are going to change the world that we live in. And it is a true honor to be by your side. So thank you so much for joining me today. Sasha, I'm going to turn it back to you, but I do want to tell our audience, this is your time. We really, really want you to ask any question that you've had or a challenge that you don't know how to solve. This is truly why Gamut Management was created, to be able to be a company to help with this process, but you have some real leaders right here at your fingertips to be able to answer your questions. So come on this journey with us.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This has been so awesome to listen to, and we have some great questions that have been submitted. And the first one I think is really important. And Mindy, I'm gonna ask it to you, but I want it to be open so anyone can answer. So this person is wondering if you could address the people first versus disability first language. They've heard mixed answers and want to make sure that their company uses the appropriate terminology. And to add to that, they've heard that the word disabled or disability has a negative connotation, and maybe they should be using special needs or special differences. So would love for you to address that.
Well, first of all, thank you, the person that asked that, because it's a perfect first question to start with. The kind of more challenging answer is that there is no perfect answer. So what I have learned, and I'm still learning every day, is that the majority, and certainly, you're always going to get those that oppose, but the majority seems to go with the fact, and I think everybody on this panel will agree, that you are a person first. Your disability does not define you, and it should never come before identifying you as a person. So yes, person with a disability. Oliver, who has muscular dystrophy, identifying them as people first as it relates to the word disability. Again, another polarizing and very interesting conversation. I would love anybody on the panel to weigh in on this. I have my own personal view. I do not necessarily want Oliver, the word disability you hear, unfortunately, in negative ways, right? You hear it in traffic reports that a disabled car is on the side of the road causing havoc. And so therefore that represents a car that broke down. To use that then for a human is a little difficult for me as a mother. However, it is certainly what it is. So Oliver has a disability, the population of people with disabilities. So I think to kind of go with the majority, I would always defer to people with disabilities, using the word after. Things like special needs or differently abled or other ways to say that word are certainly a personal decision. I tend to refer to Oliver as differently abled. When I first started, actually, I got a lot of negative feedback to that from the public, but it is still my personal decision to use that. From a company's perspective, which I think is where the question came from, I would defer to that. People first, people with disabilities, the population of people with disabilities. And whoever sent in that question, you can certainly email me. I have an amazing kind of cheat sheet of language for people with disabilities that I'm happy to share. And that's mindy@gamutmanagement.com. Anybody else quickly on the panel want to just raise your hand and weigh in on that? Go ahead, Brandon.
So I think to your point, the fact that it has such a negative connotation is the exact reason why we need to use the word and why we need to have, again, this representation and show people disability is not like a death sentence. It doesn't mean you're going to live your entire life suffering and being a victim or any of those things that none of us here are. And so we have a disability, we have adversity that we deal with on a daily basis. But again, that's not the definition of who we are. So I think using the word has power, and I would almost refrain from the second part where the question asks, should we maybe use differently abled or special needs? I think that does maybe more harm than just using the word disability, because we don't want you to shy away from it. We don't want you to act like we don't have a disability or don't have the things that we do. And so that would be my opinion. Definitely it's more than okay to use the word disability and to not be afraid of it.
Yep. Awesome. Julian.
Yeah, Brandon said a lot of what I was going to say, so I'll just second most of that and then just add, especially in my case, because not everybody who's disabled is chronically ill. I'm also chronically ill, and I will get progressively sicker over time, unfortunately, but that is a fact, and a lot of people, when they talk to me, I think they're afraid of it because it plays on their own mortality. They're kind of like, oh, they get afraid, oh, you have a feeding tube, you can't eat, does that mean you're going to die soon? Like, it just starts all of these scary questions for people. And I think disability comes with both what Brandon said, where they think we don't have a quality of life, and then it also, they kind of relate it to death, I think, like, as well, which isn't always necessarily true or always like a bad thing, which is a whole nother topic, death positivity. But in any event, I think it is also important to not shy away from it, because even though we are people also, the disability is, to me at least, way too tied into my identity to separate the two. Like, I am a disabled person, I am a trans person, like, I'm not a person with trans, like, you know what I mean? They're a part of me, and I can't turn it on and off. So while there are other things I love to do, like fashion and writing and marketing, it's just too much a part of me. I can't separate it. That was it.
Sasha, can I add just quickly one more before you go to the next question? One more important thing that I want to tell people, because I think this is so important, the history of the word handicapped, that unfortunately is so embedded in our world and culture, and no better time to start rethinking things like this. The derivative of the word handicap came from the fact that people with disabilities could only be beggars and put their cap in their hand and beg on the street. And that is what is the derivative of handicapped. So I think as a society and a world, we can certainly do better, and we can certainly have conversations like this to move on and go to in a different direction. Sorry, go ahead, Sasha.
No, that was great. So I just wanted to shout out that one of our attendees today is Lucy Jones, who in the past has actually been a part of some of our panel discussions with Mindy. If you're not familiar with Lucy, and Lucy, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I'm just going to do a shout out. She designs for the seated body, where, you know, traditionally, historically in fashion, designers design for the standing body. So if you're interested, look up Lucy. And one of, this is a two-parter. It's a comment, and then I'm adding another question onto it. She actually suggests for anyone who's interested, who's from a brand or is a designer, to read the book Disability Visibility by Alice Wong. She highly recommends it, so I'm happy to send out a link in my follow-up if anyone's interested in reading that. But you know, I think, you know, Marty and Julian have kind of gone into some of the challenges they face on an everyday basis, whether it's like the feeding tube, or what are the challenges of physically being in the wheelchair, and like the unbuttoning of the pants that you said. I think it would be really interesting for everyone to maybe go around and share, if you're comfortable, what are those physical challenges when it comes to dressing that you face. And I think that would give some great, you know, context to like how the designers are going to start thinking of solutions and incorporating these adaptations into their clothing. And maybe we could start with Grace. That was a long question. Do you want me to repeat the end of it? So that it basically is, what are some of the challenges you face on an everyday basis when it comes to clothing or shoes or accessories or fashion? You just need to unmute. Sorry, Linda and Grace.
I like to open.
Well, what's hard for you sometimes?
It's hard to button my shirt. Zip my zippers.
Right. When the buttons are too small, it becomes more of a challenge, rather than, you know, something that you can kind of grab onto.
Perfect. And maybe I can just add, so while we have Grace and Linda answering that question, if everyone can maybe, if there is something that exists, if there's a brand or something that's worked really well for you, maybe describe it, or do you feel like there's a brand that's like really spoken to you? I know Brandon's wearing his Tommy Hilfiger, and they have an adaptive fashion line. So Grace, have you found that there are any brands that really feel that might speak to you or cater to your needs?
I mean, I think too, it's a little bit harder. Grace does have some issues with fine motor skills, but that's not her primary disability. So she does pretty well. I would hate to answer something just to make it up. But she does enjoy clothes that feel good and soft on her, but still look very good. But I would say the struggle and the fine motor would be the smaller buttons. But we, you know, just we've learned how to do zippers and whatnot, and not everybody, you know, has the same challenges when you have Down syndrome. So
Me too.
That would be one that I would feel more comfortable with. You know, somebody that does have more challenge in the clothing world.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Grace.
Sure,
Maybe Brandon.
I could step in and speak to that if you'd like. Yeah, I think you know, to that point, I mean, this is not a one size fits all solution. I mean, just looking at our panel, I mean, disabilities are far ranging. So I think there would be some serious challenges for one designer to try and be all things to all disabilities. You know, and so I think there may need to be a more niche approach to certain types of clothing. Like for me, stretch is good. Like I said, I like to wear slim fit clothing, you know, and so putting on a jacket is extremely difficult. You know, I can't just wrap it behind my back, put my arms down my side, and flip it up over my shoulders anymore. That's just not how it works. I have to go one arm, stretch it around, try and bend my arm, tweak it, and get my elbow through if I can, you know. So, and then on the pants, you know, stretch is great for me because it allows my waistband to be more comfortable. And, you know, I hate to go to the gym and have to stand up, and then all of a sudden those two buttons aren't done, you know. So stretch works amazingly well, and I really do like the inclusion of zippers into what I use, like at the bottom of my pants, like on skinny jeans, having zippers that'll come up like on the inside of my calf, so that I could empty a leg bag if I'm wearing one, you know, or a shirt that could even just fall nicer onto my lap, because when I'm sitting, it's either all gathered around my waist or things like that. So there's just small things here and there, but I think it would be very difficult to try and do all things for, you know, all people in their needs. So perhaps there needs to be industry-wide communication about who's attacking what issues, and you know, take a more niche and targeted approach to things, because there's just too much. And you know, when it comes to manufacturing and supply chain, that's just going to be a mess. So I think a more targeted approach would be pretty good.
Yeah, I would love to add to that as well. For me, with leg braces, I struggle a lot with finding shoes. So I was super excited to see UGG add that second zipper, because it literally means the difference between me being able to wear something and not. And when you have a leg brace, you know, for those of you who aren't, you know, very well versed in it, your foot is already at a 90-degree angle. So even when I shop flat shoe section on Zappos or any other website, even a flat boot is going to have 1.5 inch incline, which for me, I can't even wear that. My foot is already locked at a 90-degree in my brace. So finding actually flat sole shoes that are light, that are wide width, that have a whole full side zip, like on a flat boot, or you know, a shorter boot like the Uggs, the double zipper, different sizes is super helpful as well.
Go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, to echo what Stella was just saying, I also have leg braces, and shoes are really difficult to find, but also wrapping the brace around pants, it's really complicated because I do walk, but I am in a wheelchair most of the time. But if I am going to be walking around, I have to wear like leggings or like really thin pants for it to fit inside of the brace. And I'm supposed to wear them while I'm in my wheelchair as well, in case I do have to get up for any reason. But sometimes I don't want to wear leggings, I want to wear jeans, but they don't fit well in the jeans, and the jeans also cut me in the stomach. So the options have really dwindled, as well as cutting kind of where my feeding tube is. Another big one I face is, I wear all kinds of clothes. Like, even though I identify as male, I wear dresses sometimes, or just, I'm not opposed to wearing masculine clothes or feminine clothes. When you have a feeding tube, you're hooked up to this line, kind of like when you have an IV. So that line has to come out somewhere, and it's right in the middle of your stomach. With a shirt, that's not really an issue. But if you want to wear a dress, which I'm not the only person, there's lots of people like that, you have to wear a dress that either has a cutout in the middle or it has a cutout somewhere in the side for that line to come out. Because if it's too low, you're going to step on it, or you risk it can rip the whole tube out, which is dangerous. As well as backpacks, like you have to carry around a backpack with you when you have a feeding tube. And they do make feeding tube backpacks, except they're very medical. And I used to love, like Louis Vuitton bags or Michael Kors. Like, I love stuff like that, but I can't use it because it won't fit it. It has to hang a certain way. They just don't make fashionable bags like that. I could go on with so many niche issues, but I hope that was it for you.
Sasha, I just want to kind of weigh in on two things before it goes so fast. I can't believe we're about to run out of time. First and foremost, this is my push for people to come back next week, because you will hear from brands that are succeeding in including adaptive into their portfolios. And we certainly don't want to take away from this that it's insurmountable, because it is. And this is why we're here, and we're here to be a support. Second is that I want to reiterate something that I was fortunate enough to say in the interview is, I can't ask this because nobody can answer, but the button and the buttonhole was invented in the 13th century. The fact that we are still using technology that was developed then on our current clothing when we run our lives through this thing is unimaginable. So we have opportunity here. There's ways to rethink the way clothing can be put on the body. The way things have been done doesn't mean that they have to be done that way. So I want everybody to have a good takeaway of the fact that this is solvable. We are here to help do that, and there are brands that are succeeding in it. There are academics and researchers that have amazing data behind it. And most importantly, the last panel discussion, you will see also people with disabilities that are also succeeding in it. So that was my, last pitch of our panel.
No, that's so great. And I'm glad you reiterated that, Mindy, because there are a lot of people asking about, how can we get involved in more of these types of conversations? So there's a lot more to come, and you each will receive an email. And I just want to thank, everyone who's submitted a comment or a question. There's a lot of wonderful comments coming in from people who have their own disabilities of, what has worked for them, whether it's adaptive Uggs from Zappos, or whether it's using magnets on their clothes instead of buttonholes. So thank you for sharing that. And I do understand from reading these comments that there are, we have there's so much room to grow, because it is expensive and there aren't enough brands out there So thank you everyone for submitting those. I want to just also address some of the comments. Yes, this video is being recorded for anyone who's expressing interest in watching it again. There are also a few people who are asking for additional resources, whether it's for themselves, for their companies, or for them being a parent of a child with a disability. I'll definitely work with Mindy on putting something together so you guys have some information and some next steps you can each take. But since we're at time, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us. Mindy, Marty, Brandon, Grace, Estella, Julian, I can't thank you guys enough for lending us your voices and your time. And it's just so important to hear directly from you. And I hope we can keep you all involved as I said, as we advance this conversation in our industry. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the CFDA. And thank you so much for everybody that joined, and hope to see you next week.
Yes, we'll see you all next week. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.